Harris Hall, and welcome online to the Tuesday, January 31st regular meeting of the Board of County Commissioners. First thing I will mention is that you'll see 4 county commissioners up here at the dais, and our 5th county commissioner, Commissioner Buck, is joining us online, and anyone in the hall can see her to can see Commissioner Buck to my left, to your right if you're sitting in the audience. Welcome everyone. And first thing we'll go to Mr. Mokrahajski is adjustments to the agenda. Do we have any?
Staff does not have any adjustments, Chair.
To the Board of Commissioners? I see none. And then Mr. Mokrahajski, any emergency business?
No.
Ms. Pettigrew, any that you're aware of?
No, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And to the board? I see none. We'll move down the agenda into public comments. Public comments, you're allowed 3 minutes. You'll hear an audible sign at 30 seconds from that 3 minutes. So that's at 2 minutes and 30 seconds. If you're in Harris Hall, you can keep an eye on the clock on the wall to my left, the time on the wall to my left. And at 30 seconds, you'll hear just the audible chime, very recognizable. And at that point, can you summarize? And at 3 minutes, I will ask you to step away from the mic. Those of you online, I'll cover those instructions when we get to the online portion of this meeting. So we'll listen to public comment from anyone present in Harris Hall first, and that'll be followed by anyone who may be online to deliver public comment. If you prefer to send a written public comment, please send that, and it will be added into the public record for today's meeting. So with that, I'll open public comment. And first person signed up in Harris Hall is David Eigel, who's the only person signed up in Harris Hall this morning. Mr. Eigel, if you'd step to the mic, identify yourself, and begin your 3 minutes.
I'm David Eigel, long-term born and raised Eugenian. I'm here again to talk about the problems at the Lane County History Museum, and as well as the misinformation that's actually being fed to us through many different institutions, including the University of Oregon and others that we would think of as legitimate organizations. A Eugene native, Professor Frederick Dunn, devoted his life to education in Oregon. He was beloved around the state, like David Frohnmeyer. He left Oregon, attended Harvard University, and returned to provide a lifetime of love and service to this community as well as the whole state. The story of Dunn as Klan leader first appeared 30 years after Dunn Hall was dedicated. This is when it was published in 1992 in a crackpot, non-peer-reviewed article. In 2016, a dishonest non-Oregonian named Michael Schill, while playing campus politics, scammed the U of O trustees into denaming Dunn Hall. As I have more than documented, the current Racing to Change exhibit at the Lane County History Museum is an embarrassment to our community. Preposterous lies are being presented as fact. Many families who have relatives named have been defamed by the inane filth that has been displayed. The authentic history of this community has been replaced by anti-white Protestant ranting. Lane County tax revenues are being used to fund the private bigotry of people like Jennifer Yeh. As a member of the Lane County History Society attending the last annual meeting, I was removed for simply having asked a perfectly legitimate question, and politely and for no legitimate reason. The Bart Akins, the president of the Lane County History Society, did nothing. When I ran into him by chance a few months later, he just said, "Oh, well, I didn't, tell Bob Hart to do that," and he did nothing about this. When I subsequently objected to the management about the dishonest content, I was directed to Ms. Aram, the historian of the Lane County History Museum. She had promised to get back to me, and when she couldn't get back to me and more time passed, and I held off dealing with the matter publicly, she announced that she didn't believe anything I said. She couldn't challenge anything based on facts, but she would be too busy to respond. And this is someone who couldn't disprove anything. She could have 200 years, she couldn't disprove it. There's no question about what's going on. This is gross misinformation. Ms. Yeh and the president of the Historical Society, Bart Akin, have attempted to silence me, claiming it would be harassment if I were to contact any member of the Lane County History Museum. Amazingly, Mr. Akin has also claimed in writing that he has the right to withhold information from other members of the board of the Lane County Historical Society. The video of the annual meeting was—
Thank you, Mr. Eigel.
Oh, am I up?
This morning today, yes.
Is that it? Sorry, thank you.
Next, we'll entertain public comment from online. And Ms. Jones will conduct the online queue if there is one. Ms. Jones, do we have anyone signed up online?
Thank you, Chair Farr. I do not have anyone signed up online at this time.
And I'll ask, is there anyone else in Harris Hall who wishes to provide testimony to the Board of County Commissioners this morning? Seeing none, I'll close public testimony and move along to Commissioners' response to public comments and/or other issues and remonstrance. To my left, I see Commissioner Lovell.
Thank you, Chair. Nothing to respond to public comments, just kind of a shout out this week. We had a newly opened Restored Connections Peer Center run by Stephanie Cameron. This is a no barrier place where people with challenges in mental health or drug rehab can come without having a quick set of rules they have to abide by. They can come in any shape they are and get immediate help and counseling and a snack and, you know, a warm greeting. And I think that's a great step to the future of our community where we can help people from the street get to that next level. I think that's something we've been lacking in our community. And I just want to shout out to Stephanie Cameron and her staff. I called them yesterday. They seem to be on it and awake and aware and ready to do the job of our community. So I just want to shout out to them.
Thank you, Commissioner Lovell. Any further response, remonstrances? Then I'm just going to mention one thing. I happened to be, I wasn't the only one, but I was in Salem 3 times last week for a series of different meetings. 2 of them involved the OHA and DHS, that's Oregon Health Authority and Department of Human Services. And I met with both of the directors in both of those meetings. And the encouraging thing about that is that we have reformed at the Association of Oregon Counties as a local government advisory committee that dissolved about 8 years ago. And it's a committee that will be directly talking to the directors of OHA and DHS on a monthly basis. From this meeting forward, they'll be held actually in OHA offices. And it's an opportunity for OHA and 36 counties represented by AOC to meet directly and talk about issues that may become issues if they weren't brought up early, a chance for early communication. It's been pretty agreeable so far. Commissioner Trieger, Vice Chair Trieger was online at the meeting, and Bobby Green, the former county commissioner from Lane County, who works for OHA now, was instrumental in LGAC previously, as was Gordon Foles, who many of us in this room may remember Gordon. And I'm encouraged by the work that's been done already and the opportunity that we do have to talk about things that are very critical to the services that we provide in Lane County. And both directors seem to agree that the counties are where the health authority lies, the counties are where behavioral health authority lies, and that there'll be close cooperation between both departments and the county. More to come. Anything further? Then we'll move down the agenda to our consent calendar. We have before us a consent calendar. It's passed with a single motion. There's typically no debate on the consent calendar. If anything needed to be pulled from the consent calendar, anyone, whether it be staff, county commissioner, or even the public, can actually have something pulled from the consent calendar and debated or discussed separately in a separate motion. So it is passed by a single motion. At this moment, I will entertain a motion for the consent calendar. Vice Chair Trieger.
Chair, I'll move passage of the consent calendar for Tuesday, January 31st, 2023.
And
I'll second it.
moved by Vice Chair Trieger and seconded by Commissioner Lovell. We have today's consent calendar. Discussion to the motion. I am seeing none. I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Passes unanimously. And moving directly down to item 6A, Mr. Mokaraisi, we're a little ahead of schedule compared to what we've been so far this year at this time. So everybody's here. So Mr. Mokaraisi, I'll ask you to introduce your panel. It's a report on the Lane County Planning Commission, the annual report. Mr. Mokaraisi.
Thank you, Chair, and we have Rachel Serzlov, our senior planner from Land Management Division, here to walk through the update. So go ahead, Rachel.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Farr, and good morning, Commissioners. This is Rachel Serzlov. I'm a senior planner in the Land Management Division, and I'm here this morning to present the 2022 Lane County Planning Commission annual report. Just for some background, the Lane County Planning Commission serves as an advisory committee to who's appointed by the board and advises the board on land use matters. In addition to that, the commission functions as a citizen involvement advisory committee for Lane County pursuant to ORS Chapter 197 in all aspects of comprehensive planning. Pursuant to Planning Commission bylaws, a report must be provided to the board on an annual basis documenting specific activities of the Planning Commission over the previous year. And that's the purpose of me being here today before you. And so this report was provided to you with the agenda cover memo, but I'll just give a brief summary of what was in that report. I'll cover generally the attendance of the Planning Commission over the past year and then the major milestones of what they accomplished in 2022. So in 2022, all 9 seats of the Planning Commission were filled, and the Planning Commission met for a total of 13 times, and the attendance of the Planning Commissioners was very good throughout the year. There was 1 vacancy this year that became available on October 1st, 2022, with the ending of Commissioner Betsy Schultz's term. And this vacancy was filled by the appointment of Jeffrey Choate for a first term on September 27th of 2022. And moving into some of the highlights and accomplishments of the Planning Commission in the past year, the Planning Commission met with the City of Springfield Planning Commission for a joint hearing to consider amendments to the Springfield Development Code, which were ultimately adopted by the board. The Planning Commission reviewed amendments to the Lane County Transportation Systems Plan and adopted Lane County's first bicycle master plan. And this was also ultimately adopted by the board. The Planning Commission also reviewed and deliberated on amendments to accessory dwelling units. This project is currently on hold, so the board has not reviewed it yet. There's some things that need to happen at the state before that project can continue and come before the board, but the Planning Commission did review those amendments and recommended approval to the board. So hopefully we'll be bringing that back to you very soon. Another significant milestone is the Eugene Urban Reserves project. This project was considered in a joint hearing with the Planning Commission and the City of Eugene Planning Commission. And both Planning Commissions supported adoption by the board, and this project's going to be brought before you next month, actually. And notably, the Planning Commission held 4 meetings on this project in 2022, and a total of 9 meetings since 2018. So it's a pretty significant project. And lastly, in 2022, the Planning Commission received several work sessions from staff on floodway code amendments, local implementation of statewide planning goal 5, the Willamette Lane Parks and Recreation Comprehensive Plan update, and they received updates on accessory dwelling units and wildfire mitigation bills. So that's just generally the things that came before the Planning Commission this year and major milestones that they achieved. And I'd like to thank the board for the opportunity to present that report to you, and also to thank our planning commissioners for their technical expertise, their public service, and their dedication. And lastly, I do want to note that there is a current vacancy on the Planning Commission due to the resignation of one of our planning commissioners. So we have been soliciting applications to fill that position, and as part of the process of filling that position, the board typically assigns a subcommittee of the board to conduct interviews for the appointment of that position. So today I'm also requesting that the board appoint that board subcommittee for the new planning commissioner. So that's all for me. Thank you, Chair Farr, and thank you, commissioners.
So they hardly did anything, is what you're
Yeah, it's hardly anything.
You know, that's the nature of a planning commission, whether it's a municipal or the county. I mean, the work is so much deeper quite often than the Board of County Commissioners or the city council gets involved in. And the work that they look at is, you know, stacks and stacks tall. But a quick question regarding the commissioner who resigned. Which commissioner did resign?
That was Kathy Smith.
Kathy Smith, who was from West Lane. Thank you very much. Then I'll look to the queue, and then I have a couple of questions regarding that. What you're pointing to?
Commissioner Bucks got her virtual hand up.
Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say thank you to those that volunteer on this committee. This is one of our committees that is most intensive and takes a lot of time to read a lot of intricate material. And they could be doing anything else with their time, but they're helping us in this way, and it's greatly appreciated. And clearly, they've been doing a lot of work this last year. So I just want to give a heartfelt thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I think that's echoed by all of us. You know, well, we'll talk about more when it's my turn in the queue. Further discussion, I'll let to Commissioner Seneca.
Just quick, when you start accepting applications for that vacancy?
I believe that was posted at the end of last year or early this year.
Do you know how many applications we've received?
I want to say it's around 5 right now.
Thanks. Thank you, Commissioner. Vice Chair Trieger, followed by Commissioner Lovell.
Thank you, Chair. I also really appreciate the work of this committee and just want to mention this board has in the past referred items there because of their content knowledge and expertise, because staff can take more time with them than we can necessarily do in this setting to really dig in on the particulars. And I think it's a really important part of inclusive and transparent government for us to ask our appointed community members to give us recommendations so that we are ensuring that we're hearing from folks who've been sort of vetted and working on the issues and have some content knowledge and supportive staff. So I really appreciate their time. It's really important. All of our committees that do work to recommend and help us make sure we're hearing from a broader section of the community on these issues, but this work in particular because of its complexity. And as you mentioned, a lot of times we want to do things and are unable to because the landscape literally and figuratively doesn't allow us to because of state law. So appreciate you flagging that. And when it gets to it, I know we have others in the queue and you want to talk about putting the committee together. I'm not sure how you want to proceed with that, but because we have a couple of new commissioners who maybe aren't familiar that generally, historically, that's because most of the land use issues that come to us are in the unincorporated areas. That's often in the 2 rural commissioners. It's always had at least one, and there's some particular history to that most recently that I only learned because I got to be on that committee for a reason. So when we get to that, you let us know what's going to be most helpful to help set up that interview subcommittee, which can only be 2 commissioners, so we don't have a quorum. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. One of the reasons I like to go last is sometimes I don't have to say what I was going to say anyway. So, Commissioner Lovell.
Yeah, I echo all those sentiments. Thank you for your committee's hard work. And obviously, it seems like the Planning Commission always has a target on their back based on the last disgruntled person, but we don't ever hear the success stories that you do. I think what's most exciting, you said something about the ADUs. Obviously, from Springfield, we have a lot of interest in ADUs, as does the county. And I've got some inquiries the last couple of weeks about that particular topic. And I'm just wondering what at the state level are we waiting for? And is there anything we can do to hasten that along?
Yes, if I can respond.
Please, yeah.
Thank you. So there's some complications with the Senate bill that allows accessory dwelling units being linked to the wildfire mitigation bill. And so that's causing some holdups with implementation of the ADU bill. In the current legislative session, there are some bills that have been introduced to uncouple the ADU bill and the wildfire mitigation bill. So we're kind of just waiting and watching what's happening at the legislators to see if that's going to solve any issues with implementation.
Sounds like we as a county might need to specify some fire barriers and that sort of policies around the ADUs that would maybe help speed that up.
It's certainly something that we could look at in our local implementation, but due to the language that's in Senate Bill 391, the accessory dwelling units bill, it specifically links it to the wildfire mitigation bill, which requires that some mapping be done at the state level, and that mapping hasn't been done, and we're waiting for that. So we are monitoring the situation. Unfortunately, I don't think there's anything that we can do locally to push that forward.
That's right. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. And, you know, all of us, on that note in particular, all of us have expressed interest in moving forward as quickly as possible with ADUs outside of urban growth boundaries. And before I go, Vice Chair Trieger, you're pointing to, okay, Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to add a little context to that. Alex Kyler is working right now up in the legislature after he speaks to us today, I'm sure. And I believe he is following a potential bill that will decouple those two bills so that we can move forward with ADUs. Thank you, Chair.
And thank you, Commissioner Buck. Further discussion, further comments? And as I was saying, we're all particularly interested in ADUs because everybody knows the shortage of housing. And ADUs in rural residential, that's not a huge amount of front doors, but it is some front doors. And anything that we can do is going to help ease the burden that we're bearing right now with the low vacancy rates. And really, people just don't have places to go. If you rent it out of your existing rental, you're probably not going to find a place to rent because it's that difficult. If you move here from someplace, if you graduate from high school here, you're not going to find places to live. So it's getting more and more difficult. And Ms. Ursula, this rural residential, not a huge part, but it is certainly a part. The other thing I'd like to mention is that the Planning Commission does a lot of work, and they do make recommendations to us. And we don't always accept their recommendations. Sometimes they take all that time and make a recommendation, and we, I'll say quite frankly, we know better. No, that's not exactly the truth, but sometimes the Board of Commissioners has other considerations beyond the recommendation of the Planning Commission and any other recommending committee. I'd like to look at the makeup very briefly of the Planning Commission. There are 8 members, excuse me.
There are 8 members currently because we have a vacancy.
And so Betsy Schultz is listed as the 9th member, and Betsy has already been replaced by Jeffrey Choate.
That's true.
And Kathy Smith from West Lane has been replaced.
Yep.
So as Vice Chair Trieger stated, much of the work done by the Planning Commission exists outside of urban growth boundaries. Not entirely, but much of it does. Consequently, many of the members of the Planning Commission do live in the rural areas. And it's a pretty good balance that we tend to achieve on the Planning Commission. And that's why the committee that you're asking for typically has been historically, not always, but historically, most of the time, the 2 rural commissioners. The commissioner from West Lane and the commissioner from East Lane have been the 2 members who've had the discussions regarding adding members to the Planning Commission. So with that, we'll have that discussion in just a second. But I see that I'm just going to go down the litany of what we have on the Planning Commission. It's East Lane, South Eugene, West Lane, East Lane, Coastal, South Eugene, West, and East Lane. So that's kind of the mix that we have right now. So what do you need from us now? I'm through talking. You just want us to recommend a committee for you?
Yes, please.
Vice Chair Trieger, do you have something?
I would recommend, if both are amenable, that we ask our East and West Lane colleagues to be that interview committee.
And I'm looking to both are to my left right now. Commissioner Buck, your continuation as that, you've served on that committee before, and Commissioner Lovall, is that something you'd be amenable to?
Sure.
Very good. It meets 4 times a week, roughly 6 hours per meeting for about 3 months.
Awesome.
Okay, so Vice Chair, go
Yeah,
ahead.
just to clarify, this is simply to review the applicants and interview and make a recommendation to this board for who to appoint to fill the vacancy. Thank you.
And that was tongue-in-cheek. They don't meet that frequently, so very good. Then we don't need any action on that. I think the committee that is recommended is continuation with the rural committee commissioners. And Ms. Surslev, anything else that you need to address for this agenda item? Mr. Mokrajewski, I think we're good for the board. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
See you soon. Then we'll move down to item 7A, which is Order 230131-02, in the matter of implementing paid leave Oregon contributions for employees represented by American Federation of State, Municipal, and County Employees, General, Nurses, and Physicians units. So that's 3 units, and that's commonly known as AFSCME. And Mr. Mokrajewski, I will ask you to introduce your panel.
Thank you, Chair. I think, who am I turning over to, Kristen or Andrea? Kristen? Okay, Kristen Mayfair, our Senior Labor Relations Analyst in Human Resources, here to walk through this item.
Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. As you're aware, Oregon Legislature enacted what is now known as Paid Leave Oregon, referred to as PLO, through House Bill 2005 in 2019. The law provides paid time off for working Oregonians to care for themselves or a loved one in medical, family, and safe leave situations. Starting in September of 2023, employees will be able to apply for wage replacement under PLO through the state of Oregon for qualifying life events for up to 12 weeks per year, with the potential for an additional 2 weeks for issues related to pregnancy. The new law is something all wage-earning Oregonians must comply with and was designed to be funded through contributions from both employers and employees, similar to the way Social Security works.
Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. Paid Leave Oregon is funded by a payroll tax through deductions collected by all Oregon employers. If you're an employer with fewer than 25 employees, you are not required to make payments on behalf of the employer. However, those employers are still required to collect and submit payments on behalf of the employee. The contribution rate is currently set at 1% of an employee's wages. And the statutory default for the collection of the contributions is that the employer pays 40% of the 1% and that the employee pays 60% of the 1%. The law does allow employers to pick up the entire 1%. Because of that option, the contributions become a mandatory subject for bargaining. Under the law, the contributions of the 1% of the employee's wages were set to begin on January 1st of 2023. Lane County began bargaining with all of our bargaining units regarding the contribution piece in fall of 2022. We engaged in 90-day expedited bargaining under Oregon's labor law. Due to scheduling the 90 days for the majority of the units, the bargaining continued into 2023. Lane County has been paying the full 1% for all eligible employees since January 1st, 2023, until we have completed our bargaining obligations with all of our unions and associations. All of our represented groups have agreed to the statutory default of the 60-40 split of that 1%, except unfortunately we have not been able to reach an agreement with our 3 AFSCME units.
The county carefully considered the financial, administrative, and operational impacts of the proposals AFSCME put forth, and we also checked with many other public entities around the state, and with the exception of a couple of them, with those that we actually spoke with, no one else is paying any part of the statutory default for the employee portion. Since we haven't been able to come to an agreement with AFSCME within the 90 days required under the law, which ended on January 22nd of 2023, we're putting this item in front of you today to consider implementing that statutory default. Any costs beyond the 40% required by the law of employers has not been accounted for in county budgeting processes. So the item before you is to consider implementing that 60% contribution for employees of the AFSCME General Nurses and Physicians Unit of the 1% of wages. If approved, the Lane County staff will work to make the contribution deductions effective February 4th, 2023, which is the beginning of the next pay period. We will also be beginning that collection for all other Lane County employees. We have Senior HR Leaves Analyst Sherry Sanders here with us today, who has been very intimately involved with Paid Leave Oregon and communicating with public entities around the state. So she's here to help answer any questions that you may have. With that, I'll turn it over to any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Nagel, Ms. Mayfair. I'll look to the board for questions or comments. That's it? No. Vice Chair Trigger.
Quick question just for this round and just for clarification for the record. If we begin collecting at the first pay period in February, it is not retroactive, is that correct?
That's correct.
And thank you. And the other jurisdictions or municipalities you mentioned that are not following the statutory, is there a range of what they're doing? In other words, is the employer picking up the full 1%? Did they bargain a different percentage split? How are those being handled?
With the exception of one that I know for sure, no one is picking up anything of the employer portion.
And the one that is picking up, that we know about, they're paying the full 1%.
The employer is paying the full 1%. Thank you.
Excellent. Further discussion?
And just to clarify, so all
You
our
should
other,
look at me first, so.
oh, I did.
Commissioner Zuniga,
I did.
I didn't
Sorry.
call you, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Chair. And just to, confirm, all our other unions reached an agreement, no problem, and waiting.
They did come to agreement
Staff's
with us under bargaining to proceed with the changes that we've outlined in the APM that was attached to the materials for today.
Thank you, Commissioner. Lovell, no? Commissioner Buck, your hand is raised, I see.
Thank you, Chair. And this might be largely symbolic, but I have and I continue to be open to negotiation on those percentages, and knowing that some agencies and some others have been able to do that. One thing that's really important to me, though, in that factor is if we do it for one bargaining contract and not others, I find that fundamentally unfair as a benefit for our entire staff. So, I am open to that change in the future, and have been for some time. And so for that reason, I will be a no on this vote. And I say that it's largely symbolic because I'm fairly certain this will pass. But I just wanted to state that for the record. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Further discussion? Okay, then I have nothing to add. We've discussed this extensively in executive session. We cannot bring that conversation outside of executive session. But all of us in the room have heard what's been said there, and whatever discussion happened, no decisions are made in executive session, obviously. So just a clarification then, we're moving forward with the 23013102, which is implementing paid leave Oregon contributions for employees represented by AFSCME, the 3 units that are represented that are in Eugene, that are in Lane County, excuse me. And AFSCME represents what percentage of Lane County employees? Do we have an approximate number on that?
I can say more than 50%.
More than 50%. Okay, very good. Okay, then I'm not going to read all the whereases on here, but anybody following online can take a look at Order 23013102, which is available online. Click on View Items, and that entire order here is before us. So I'm looking for a motion on Order 23013102. Commissioner Lovell.
Chair, I'd like to make a motion of Order 23013102 in the matter of implementing paid leave Oregon contributions for employees represented by the American Federation of State, Municipal, and County Employees Union, Nurses, and Physicians Units as written.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Lovell and seconded by Commissioner Senega. Discussion to the motion. Vice Chair Trieger.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate Commissioner Buck's comments. I'll be supporting this motion for the sake of moving us forward, but I fully echo, other than indication of a position on the item, Commissioner Buck's sentiment that I am open to and looking forward to when the contract comes around to have this be one of the many items that we discuss when it's time for bargaining. As someone who worked for many, many years to bring this policy to the state and who believes in our collective responsibility as an employer and as individuals to make a good faith contribution into this shared pool, and who knows what went into arriving at this language and this percentage split, I want to support this because I want to support the overall mission and movement that brought us this policy at the state of Oregon to begin with. But as I said, and as Commissioner Buck said, I'm perfectly willing and really looking forward to this becoming part of what we discuss in the course of regular bargaining. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. And I'll add this. It goes without being said that, of course, I support the discussions during the bargaining session. I don't need to say that. So, very good then. Any further discussion to the motion? Then I will call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Passes 4-1 with Commissioner Buck. No. Thank you very much for the work you've done.
Thank you very much,
bringing
Chair
it
and
back forward this morning. Then, Ms. Morkreisky, we'll move down to item 8A on our agenda, which is the Legislative Committee update. And I'm going to introduce Mr. Kyler. Mr. Kyler, today we have Alex Kyler, who will be presenting first the Legislative Committee update. We have a 10 a.m. time certain, Mr. Kyler. We're a few minutes early. Are you cool with that? Do you have anybody who's going to be joining you who's not going to be here till 10 o'clock?
Chair, I'm sorry, I just stepped away to talk to our Human Resources Director. So we do have Alex Kyler here and Steve Adams from our policy team to walk through the legislative update. So I don't believe that we have anyone else.
Just a clarification, this is a 10 o'clock time certain, which we're bringing in early, which is okay as long as we're not missing somebody who is anticipating it being a time certain, or potentially anybody in the public who's waiting until 10 o'clock to tune in. So
I'm going to check with the DA because I know that the DA had expressed interest in this item. So let folks know that we're moving on that now.
very good, then we're not going to recess. We'll just sit here quietly for a few moments while you check with the DA, because once again, this is a 10 o'clock time certain.
Chair Farr, if I may, you could move on to Commissioner's business and future agenda team requests if you'd like to wait for the 10 a.m.
Thank you for that suggestion, Ms. Jones. Looks like we may be waiting a little while, so we'll move along then to Commissioner's business. Any announcements from the Board of County Commissioners? Well, Ms. Jones, this may not take us till 10 o'clock. I do have one announcement that it's just kind of a perfunctory thing that I do say from time to time. And, you know, it's regarding public safety in Lane County. Public safety is the foundation of Lane County's goal to be the best place to live, work, and play. And unless our public safety system, including the Sheriff's Department and including the DA's office, is adequately funded, we're not going to reach that goal. Public safety is a foundation. Our communities need to be a safe place. Our communities need to be a safe place for people, for residents and visitors. So further announcements? Seeing none, then County Council has stepped out for a moment. So, Mr. McCarthy, do you have any announcements? Or can you tell me as the district attorney responded?
Not yet.
Okay, then
And I
let's.
think it would be okay for us to start the item, and this item is prepared.
We could also do future board assignment requests if there's any of those too, just to clear that item.
Let's do that, because I do respect the DA's information and input on this. So, so future board assignments. For the public, we're down on item 10B. I'm not seeing any future board assignments at this point in time. Commissioner Lovell.
Yeah, I've got one, Chair, thank you. I've received, if I can get some head nods, I've received several inquiries to the parameters of how we decide smaller construction remodeling jobs under the municipality and the city umbrella. Is there perhaps a dozen we have around us, local construction companies and trusted companies that are on the county's frequent call list? I'd like to get a report of the jobs we've distributed in the last 3 years, to whom and to what amounts, so we can adequately see if the county is getting the best, most efficient and cost-effective work for our ongoing needs. If I can get some head nods, maybe we can get some information that would help us.
Let me ask for a bit of clarification. You say that, are you asking for the contracts that have been let to local construction companies over the last,
Yes,
how many years again?
3 years, probably
Over the
less.
last 3 years. And that would be a pretty extensive list, I would expect. And so any company that's had a contract let to them.
Yeah, and what amounts?
Okay.
Because I've gotten some inquiries and how we can maybe do that a little more efficiently.
Okay. And I'm going to ask, before I give you my head nod, and I'm inclined to do so, Ms. McCarthy, what kind of workload impact might that be? Can you foresee?
Maybe if we just narrow it a little bit, are you requesting like construction-related projects?
Yes.
So, and is there a dollar amount threshold in particular that you're interested in?
Anything up to $10 million would probably suffice the report.
Like 0 to 10 million?
Yes.
Okay. So we're not talking about necessarily professional service. What I'm hearing is construction projects for new facility construction, renovation.
Correct.
Right, okay.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. And you know, it's easy of me, Mr. McCarthy, to sit here and think, well, you just push a button and spit out the report. Do you just push a button and spit out the report, or does this involve some?
Well, I don't. We have people that are much and our capital projects team will have access to that information. So I think we can pull it together. It may take a little bit of time, but I think we can probably report back to you in the next month or so.
Okay, and I personally like to put a time limit on what we're asking the staff to do, because we've done this in the past and it's taken staff just inordinate amounts of time to produce some reports that seem like it should be easy from this perspective. So Commissioner Lovell, would you be okay with a report back if it's going to take more than an hour of staff time?
Indeed, I would. Thank you.
Okay, so if it's going to take more than an hour of staff time, could just flag it for us and so we could reauthorize this? Does that seem fair to you?
Fair.
Ed nods on that? Okay. Vice Chair?
Thank you, Chair. I had a question. I appreciate that time parameter because we have the 15-minute rule and all those sorts of things, which I appreciate new commissioners may not be as familiar with. And you're right. I'm glad you brought up too that it seems like an easy thing, but it is a matter of public record. This is something, and so somebody could do a public records request, which we charge for because it takes staff time, to which there is cost to the county. Is that right? This could be something somebody could request public records on. I mean,
Yeah.
yes.
They could.
So if there are individuals in the community who wanted this information, they have a means to get it.
Correct.
But of course, we have county commissioners that have been elected by the public to represent them and can ask these questions anytime. So, okay.
And I guess I would, if I could follow up, ask the Commissioner Lovell, sort of I understand it's to respond to constituent requests. I guess I'm always wanting to know the why. So what we're hoping to learn that perhaps part of the assignment could be to present to us what the parameters are when we make selections for awarding contracts, because my guess is maybe that's some of what we're trying to get at here is how do we know, how do we determine with whom we contract? Is that part of what you're trying to understand?
My request is to understand the why more thoroughly.
Yeah. So whether a list gets at that or not is what I'm asking.
The information would get to the why for sure, yes.
Thank you, Vice Chair Trigger. I gave you my head nod on that, and I'll tell you why I want it, because we're creating jobs in the community every time we do this, and really for us as Lane County, people like to know that we're serving them in no small part by economically contributing. The money that we spend on capital improvements is money spent in the community, typically on jobs, on materials, whatever it may be. So that's my nod on this. Maybe a little bit different than the original intent, but it's a side benefit of receiving this report, Mr. Mulcahy. Thank you. Any further agenda team requests? Then I see that Ms. Pettigrew has joined us, so we could do council announcements if you have a moment for that.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd be glad to. Good morning, Commissioners. Nice to see you. I'm starting here, start of my third week here on the job as County Council.
And they said it wouldn't last.
And I keep coming back for more. It's really been a delight getting to know everyone, getting to know their business, and getting to know the legal challenges and opportunities that we have before us as a county. Couple updates on the status of our office. As I mentioned to you last week, we are doing a focus on staffing right now, making sure that we can fill and provide service for some of our open positions right now. We have interviews scheduled next week and then final interviews on February 13th for one, possibly two assistant county council positions. I'm pleased to say we have a robust applicant pool, and so I'm delighted that there's so much interest in joining this team and joining the broader county community of professionals. I want to thank some of the individuals that have supported this effort because it has been all hands on deck to get this recruitment going. And as I'm sure you all appreciate, recruitments can be very time intensive, and these folks do this work in addition to their other work. So I want to thank Judy Williams, Marcus Fahar, Kayla Miller, and our HR business partners and our talent team in getting us to where we are now, which is a pretty fast turnaround for an attorney recruitment. So thank you all for that. Next, I want to turn to our practice management tools. As I have joined the office, I have noted that our office could use some improvements in terms of streamlining and modernization, as well as best practices for a law practice management. So thanks to the team at Technology Services and many others, we're looking at an integrated case management platform, as well as updated calendaring tools. This would increase our transparency with our clients and within our departments, and create greater accountability and faster communication. So I look forward to giving you more updates on that, but that work is underway, and our technology services team has been working hand in hand with us to get that launched. I look forward to further communications with you this afternoon, but for now, those are my updates today.
Well, thank you, Ms. Pettigrew. Any questions or comments for Councilor Pettigrew? I see none. Thank you again.
Thank you.
And we keep kind of marching in place here.
I can talk for a minute.
I thought you might be able to. So let's call this an official agenda item, which is item 8B, County Administration announcements.
Okay, thank you, Chair. And I did correspond with District Attorney Perillo, and she is on her way from another meeting, so she'll be here in Harris Hall in a minute. So a couple things, just wanted to share with the board that I will be at the National Association of Counties Legislative Conference in Washington, D.C. Late next week and into the following week. Commissioner Farr, I believe, will also be there, and Commissioner Buck will be there as well. This is the annually the National Association of Counties meets in Washington, D.C. The various policy committees meet to talk about different issues facing counties and legislative items we may want to bring as a national group of counties forward to Congress. And then we oftentimes hear from federal officials, both in Congress, from the White House, and from the administration. I have a few sessions with the National Association of County Administrators, and one in particular that we'll be hosting regarding the value of professional management in counties. So that, just want to share that opportunity to engage with, that we'll have 3 county officials at least engaging with our peers around the country and learning what they're doing, particularly as it relates to federal issues that are coming down the pike, which I know we'll talk a bit about state as well as some federal things going on. The other item I just wanted to note for the board is that we are restarting with the new year here, our Friday Communities of Color social events that are hosted once, I believe, one Friday a month. They're hosted, and a different agency hosts them each Friday, and it's typically after hours, around 5 or 5:30, and it's at 5:30. So this week, this Friday, February 3rd, will be at the Atrium Building on Highway 99. Atrium Building 99 on West 10th. That's better, from 5:30 to 7:30. And Lane County will be hosting some of these events throughout the course of the year. So it's just a good opportunity for us to welcome and host particularly communities of color and others in the community to support individuals that are historically underrepresented. A really wonderful networking and social activity. So I would invite commissioners, staff, and members of the public to join if you're available and interested. So this Friday again is Friday, February 3rd at the Atrium Building, 99 West 10th, from 5:30 to 7:30. Okay, well, we're about 12 minutes away. You could recess, Chair, and come back at 10 o'clock.
Review assignments.
Vice Chair Trigger suggesting a review of assignments, presuming that none others come up in the interim. So do you have a review of assignments?
That would be the question, is if there are any other assignments that come up, but I could just review the one assignment from Commissioner Lovell, and that is, that did receive head nods, and that is to identify the number and type of contracts specifically related to facility construction and renovation contracts in the last 3 years from $0 to $10 million.
My understanding was first pass is assess if that's more than an hour of staff time to fulfill.
I think it
and
will
then-
take, I think just in consulting with staff, it's a couple hours of time. It should not be that time intensive to do that. We're talking specifically about capital projects that are $0 to $10 million over the last 3 years. So we can filter those out and bring you a list and have that as a starting point. Perfect, thank you.
Well, I'm excited about that.
If it is longer than an hour or two, then I will come back and for sure let you know.
Right on. Thank you very much. Then, Mr. Kyler, I think you're indicating that you can cover some other things that potentially have nothing to do with the DA. Well, not most things do have something to do with the DA, but if you want to get started, Ms. Morgraci, I'll turn the platform back to you.
Okay, So thank you, Chair. We have Alex Kyler, our Intergovernmental Relations Manager, and Steve Adams, our Policy Director, to provide you with a legislative update.
Thank you. So again, I'm Alex Kyler. I'm Lane County's Intergovernmental Relations Manager, and here on a report back from our Legislative Committee, which met on January 12th, 2023. So just a few minutes to give you some background. I'm a registered lobbyist in the state of Oregon. Steve is now a registered lobbyist in the state of Oregon. I've been representing Lane County since the 2008 session in the legislature. And we also have a fairly active presence in Congress as well, both through our membership with NACO and a contract that we have with a firm in Washington, D.C. that provides a sort of a unique framework in our region where they have individual contracts with a number of our partners, and together we call ourselves the United Front. We've been doing that work for over 35 years, and it's been incredibly effective, both from an outcome basis and from an efficiency basis, because of the nature. Typically, a lobbyist in DC is a highly expensive undertaking, but because of this framework that we have where they individually contract with each of the entities, it works out for them and it works out really well for Lane County as well. We have a legislative committee framework in the manual, and that is made up of department directors and 2 commissioners that, as you well know, those assignments for legislative committee were made during that first meeting of the year. And in these years where there is a transition on the board, it does get a little bit awkward for me just because of the timing of the legislative session. This year, legislature started a little bit earlier on January 17th, and so it just felt prudent to wait until the new board was seated and the assignments made for us to have our most recent legislative committee with this report back, obviously coming after the start of the legislative session, but nonetheless, I thought it was the best way to go. We don't really have necessarily a timed schedule for legislative committee meetings, but typically we will try to get together monthly during legislative session because of the changing nature of what happens in Salem. So you've seen in your packet that you have an attachment A, which is what we called our legislative principles and priorities document. I instituted this, I don't know, some 10 years ago, I think, or so, because when I first got to the county, it was pretty typical that almost every single bill had to come back in front of the Board of County Commissioners for a position. It was a highly cumbersome process, and as former state rep Pat Farr will know, this was the bills change hourly sometimes with amendments, and so by the time we'd get in front of the board, there'd invariably be an amendment to something, and it just was a very cumbersome process. So instead, we've developed this priorities and principles document in order to do 2 things. One is that it really provides guidance for me. A lot of times, colleagues will approach me in the hall in Salem and say, can you go visit with so-and-so on such and such? And if I've got a principle that I think sort of hits that, I'm happy to say, absolutely. If I don't, then I'm a little more circumspect about making that contact. But it's very helpful in that kind of dynamic, as well as just giving us the ability to take positions on measures, knowing that the board has seen and adopted this document. Second thing it does through the priorities section is to really establish the direction to say, Mr. Kyler, please go get that bill written, get it introduced, work it as hard as you can. Let's try to get it to the governor's desk. We're going to do anything we can to make sure that that thing happens because it's such a high priority for Lane County. So that's sort of the makeup of this document. Again, it's a very dynamic document. In our legislative committee bylaws, we are to review this document every single meeting, and as a result, it pretty much changes every time I report back to the board about what the principles and priorities are. So in today's meeting, you're going to see that there's kind of a mashup here of different colored stuff. Yellow is material we're trying to excise from the document. Green is material that we're proposing to add in. If you adopt this document, I'll clean it up and it will be the sort of the latest and greatest as of, what's today's date? The 31st of January. And then I'll share this document with our legislative delegation in Salem, who actually does know we're meeting today and is sort of eagerly awaiting, particularly the funding requests, the dollar requests. They try to really get a good handle on what the county is asking for from a fiscal nature. So again, a lot of lobbying on both sides of legislative policy issues, as well as trying to be as active as possible with the Joint Ways and Means Committee, which is really the wallet of the legislature. We've done very well in getting directed spending right into Lane County, particularly over the last couple years with both the COVID-19 pandemic and the holiday farm fire. We have secured a great deal of funding from Salem, much of it pass-through dollars from the American Rescue Plan Act, but a fair amount of general fund appropriations as well. And so we really do try to be pretty active in the budget process in Salem. And notably, that we expect to see the governor's recommended budget come out tomorrow. And so that's another very interesting dynamic in Salem right now, with agencies developing a budget under former Governor Brown, and then with the election of current Governor Kotek, sort of that whole process was reset, and agencies were asked to do certain things. I really do not know exactly what will be in the recommended budget, but we should all be diving into that document here tomorrow, I believe, is when it will come out. And again, that's a recommended budget by the governor, and then the legislature will begin its work to deliberate through that document and invariably make significant changes typically to it. This may be a different process this year. I'm just not sure, but at the end of the day, when we get down to the end of session here in late June, there will be a legislatively adopted budget, and that will carry us through for the 23-25 biennium. So if there's any questions about sort of our internal operations and how we structure things, I'm happy to take them now. Otherwise, I want to dive into the changes that we're recommending in the document.
Thank you, Ms. Carr. I will note that DA Perlow has joined us, and DA Perlow also is on the legislative committee that you mentioned. So thank you, welcome, and thanks for being here, DA Perlow. Commissioner Lovell, did you raise a hand just now? No. Then without, there may be questions, there will be questions as we go along. Alex, go ahead. Mr. Kyler, please go ahead.
Okay. So page one, so one thing that is a little concerning to me about this document is it's getting longer and longer. Really try to keep things as brief as possible because of the really busy nature of particularly elected officials in Salem. So reading through a huge tome is something that I'm really trying to avoid. So I do try to eliminate stuff where I can. The changes on page one, just because I think we already said them, but the important thing to know here is that one of the things we really try to focus on is issues that affect the operations of Lane County. So a lot of times you may get public comment or be interested in much larger issues that I refer to as sort of community-wide issues. We try, my recommendation is that we try to continue to focus on things that are really an operational issue that have been brought to bear. And I did note this morning, even with a couple of your presentations, you heard one already about land use and accessory dwelling units. I heard in the HR one, somebody mentioned statutory stuff. So, I mean, this is the kind of thing that I've listened for over the years, is when staff are presenting and they say, well, we could do that except for state law says we can't, then that's sort of a key for all of us to kind of go, okay, well, should we try to change that? Because this is what legislature's there for, is to keep changing the law. So just sort of things to keep your ears on. So anyway, a fairly minor change on the front page. And then we get into a little bit more in terms of the second page, where we've really lifted the priority bills to the top of the list here. And I'm just going to run through these real quickly. The first one is amending the Oregon Tort Claims Act. This is an issue we've been working on for a number of years. And commissioners, you're aware of active litigation that arose from a court-ordered patient or a defendant, Springfield Municipal Court, who was ordered into our care at behavioral health in 2015. And there was a terrible crime that he committed when he was living with his parents after that. And we were sued by the estates of those individuals. So at any rate, it sort of lifted up for us the risk exposure that we face when the court orders people into our care. And in particularly, that happens a lot with patients that are defendants who are termed aid and assist, unable to aid and assist in their own defense. Prior to the 21 session, those patients, for the most part, were treated behind the four walls of the state hospital. In 2021, a new bill was passed that mandated that those who are only charged with a misdemeanor shall be treated in the community. And so we really felt that that actually upped our risk exposure. So I've been working for a couple of years now on this issue of trying to get an indemnification framework, which is what we enjoy on the federal side of things. Because we have a federally qualified health center. So we're really trying to mimic that framework from the federal government into the state government as well. Obviously, a funding issue, we're trying to get what we consider the second tranche of funding for the multipurpose facility at the Lane County Fairgrounds. We had sought $15 million previously, and we were appropriated $7.5 million, and so we're continuing to try to see if we can leverage the second $7.5 million out of this session of the legislature. We're trying to get funding, both operational and capital funding, for the Behavioral Health Crisis Stabilization Center. We did well in this last budget bill that the President Biden signed in early December or mid-December, and continue to see if we can find funding and appropriate policy language for Stabilization Center during this legislative session. We've got a priority to make sure that we maintain funding for the Impacts grant program. It's a program that's a joint effort between the Criminal Justice Commission and the Oregon Health Authority, and it's been a really good place for us. We've got I don't know if the board has been briefed recently, but we've got called a Forensic Intensive Treatment Team, the FIT team, that we are provided funding for through that effort. We are working on we have a bill introduced, Senate Bill 439. This was a previous priority that the previous board adopted. It's just an alignment in farm and forest zones for replacement dwellings. I think there was some testimony here.
First meeting.
First day, of the fellow, I believe he's the guy who actually lifted this whole issue up. And we did get this as a priority pre-session, and we're able to get a bill pre-session filed that should take care of that if we can get it to the governor's desk. We're seeking $20 million for the IMRF, the Integrated Material and Energy Recovery Facility at Short Mountain Landfill, or that could be located either at the Short Mountain Landfill or in the community of Goshen. But at any rate, we're trying to figure out how we can get money for that facility. We've got a new priority here to seek a measure to ensure that innocent purchasers of land in Lane County are able to ensure that they can use those lands. There was an issue here where there was a fraudulent partition of land, and the upshot of it was that a couple of families ended up with some land that they obtained through the fraudulence of the owner, who is a local land use attorney. So we're trying to make sure that those people can actually continue to have those parcels as they were divided, in order to kind of fix that particular issue. And then also continuing to work on fire revenue for Lane County. We have a significant amount of money that has been appropriated for wildfire recovery. I know you've gotten a great deal of testimony about frustrations coming from upriver. Commissioner Buck is very familiar with this issue. We've just really been trying to get dollars out of Oregon Housing and Community Services Department, and it's been a struggle. So we've got a little tactic here that we might be able to actually get money reappropriated to DAS and then to Lane County, which would just take care of this whole issue for us. Big bill that was heard early in session is seek a revenue source to reverse a historical decline in CAFA funding. That's the County Assessment Financial Function Assistance Grant. You will hear more about it as you get into the budget process, but it was designed to provide a fairly significant amount of funding to the assessors across the state of Oregon in order to ensure that that assessment function could happen, in Lane County's case, on behalf of 85 taxing districts. And unfortunately, that fund has, in 2008, the legislature clawed back their general fund appropriation for that funding and never replaced it. And so we've got a bill in play, or there is a bill in play, that would reintroduce that general fund appropriation, as well as examine ways to provide other funding into the assessment function in order to bring that level of assistance back to what it was historically. It's really dropped precipitously. We're looking for a funding source for county emergency management, specifically county emergency management. And Steve Adams has been doing a great deal of work on getting something into play on that issue, and we're hopeful that we will get some traction on this effort. Sometimes these kinds of things take a few sessions to get done. So we're sort of late with some of these ideas, but the idea is to get a conversation going this session. If we can't get it across the finish line, at least when we come back in 25, people will recall it, and we've maybe worked out some of the bugs that people have alerted us to along the way. So I'm really pretty hopeful that we'll be able to do more to support county emergency management through this effort. We're trying to ensure that we've got funding for the build out and development of the Four Corners site to allow for post-prison housing on that site, another good project. And then seek funding resources for special district formations and other technical assistance. I think the board has received a presentation from the folks down at Row River in particular, who are really encountering some of the challenges. It takes a lot of work to establish a new district, and sometimes without really a clear source of funding. So we're hoping that we can direct some funding to that. But turning now to the Lane County United Front priorities, again, we go to Congress, we go to Washington, D.C. once a year, typically in the spring. And for the last two sessions of Congress, they have, each chamber has adopted rules that allow for them to do congressionally directed spending as part of their budget process. The old vernacular was earmarking, but that went away for a number of years, about 10 years, and came back 2 sessions ago. And our lobby team really helps us out with ensuring that we get all our paperwork, and we lobby for those projects, and we've done quite well since the return of congressionally directed spending for the last 2 budget cycles. I think there's a lot of trepidation about what's going to happen in this current session and the budget evolution and how that will go, but we are still queuing up some projects, and so you can see what we've got proposed here. The first one is really just a policy issue. It is ensuring that any and all claims that have been are supposed to be covered under the FQHC framework for indemnity are actually covered. This has been a problem for us in particular and other FQHCs in Oregon, and Senator Wyden has really been a proponent in helping us with this particular issue. We are going to continue to look for funding for improvements for communications infrastructure in Lane County, particularly resilience improvements, where what we found during the Holiday Farm fire was when we lost one tower, we did not have a resilient system, and there was no sort of redundancy, and so there was a lot of communications problems there that we're working on fixing. We did get $5 million out of legislature in the short session to help with that issue, and those resources are being deployed as we speak. We have in the last Congress, there was quite a bit of money authorized for Lane County to work on water and wastewater systems through the Water Resources Development Act. It's only an authorizing bill, so it says that there is this project that can be funded. What it doesn't say is if the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers agrees. And so we've got some work to do with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to do this work. It joins a number of other Army Corps of Engineer priorities, including the 42nd Street levee, which I'm sure, Commissioner Laval, you're aware of. That's been a United Front priority as well that we've all joined in working on. So we got great language in the WRDA Act, but we need to find the funding, and that's one of the focus points for this trip, is to ensure that we can see if we can get those dollars actually into a budget. We've got some problems still upriver with road reconstruction in Blue River. Particularly, there are roads up there that are not publicly owned, they're local access roads, and really don't have a source of funding for the repair of those roads. So I think we have a potential path to asking for some funding for that work in this trip, during this trip. And then 42nd Street levee, I think, is on here. Looking at potentially some money to do sort of a first step in looking at adding an exit ramp from I-5 to the Short Mountain landfill. Right now, everybody's got to go through Goshen. So there's some benefits to seeing if we could eventually get an exit ramp down and pass. And then again, the Four Corners site for reentry housing. So that's really the document as it pertains to those priority bills. The other stuff is all the legislative principles. You can see that we've made a number of changes and added a couple of things. Where we've eliminated in the yellow stuff, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's no longer an issue for us. It's more like we accomplished it. So that's, there's sort of a mix of specifics and broader principles in this section, but where the yellow is, we've by and large solved the problem and are striking it in order to save as much space in the document as possible. I will say that we've got a brand new section here for emergency preparedness and resilience. We've got a brand new section on housing. And I wanted to point out on page 8 of that attachment is we do have decouple the ADU implementation from fire mapping. That is something that we're recommending. We won't necessarily be the lead on that. There's actually a number of bills that have already been introduced on that issue. And I think all I'm doing right now is trying to figure out, okay, which is the vehicle that will move forward for hearing, which will be the one that the legislature focuses in on to try to solve that issue, which they're well aware of. You can see we've also had an existing priority there to try to eliminate the 2-acre minimum for ADUs in rural parts of the county as well. That had been flagged by the previous board. I did want to say that, as a document of this size, there's one mistake that I did flag. It's on page 7, about halfway down. It begins support efforts to combat opioid overdoses by increasing the availability and access to naloxone. I think I was only supposed to take off by increasing the availability and access to naloxone. There are other terms now used for naloxone. Commissioner Krieger was actually testifying on a bill last night about this very issue. So I just meant to strike by increasing the availability and access to naloxone. Obviously, I think we continue to want to support efforts to combat opioid overdoses. So I'm happy to take any questions about this, and I think, Mr. Chair, that this may be an opportunity the DA.
The DA has left.
I spoke to the DA, so I'm happy to address.
Any questions or comments from Mr. Kyler? We have two different things to talk about. One is the principal's document, which, Mr. Kyler, you've given us a copy of that online. Anybody watching online can see that. With the strikeouts are in place and the small number of additions. I think that's going to make your document a little bit shorter once we do the work on that. But so we have that to discuss, and then also both the state legislative priorities and the federal legislative priorities. So at this point, I'll look to the board for discussion, questions, comments.
Sure. Chair?
Commissioner Senega, sorry, I'm keeping track of the conversation here too.
I just had one question. I didn't see the cafe bill. We're getting a lot of conversation about agritourism and such, and
Sure.
what is that?
Mr. Chair and Commissioner Senega, I believe under Public Works, I think we got it.
At the bottom of page 8, allow for farm-to-table operations on agricultural lands.
So what Commissioner Senega is referring to here is we did have a measure that we tried to get, we did have a bill that we did introduce into the legislature. I want to say it was the 2019 session. It was after, there was a great deal of media coverage over farm-to-table
Agrarian.
brew pub, Agrarian Ales in Coburg. And they had a restaurant. And the land use laws in Oregon just don't allow for that. Some restaurants can exist on large wineries. And then since then, there was a bill that allows for limited sales of food on a apple orchard where cider is made, but it's still prepackaged foods. Anyway, so we had worked on a measure with Senator Beyer, with our staff. We had work groups during the interim. I thought everything was pretty well teed up. The Farm Bureau didn't like the measure, and Senator Beyer was just unwilling to keep pushing on it. So it comes up from time to time, and my understanding is commissioners have received some input about this issue. Very frustrating issue for me, and we actually modeled what we had proposed off of sort of how it works in the state of Vermont, which are really pretty robust farm cafes. Steve Adams used to work in the state of Vermont and knew something about this as well. I saw the Farm Bureau representative last night in Salem and asked her about it, and she still didn't seem very enthusiastic. So we don't have this in play. We still have it as a principle, so we would support somebody who wanted to do it. This can get changed, at the will of the board. This document can get changed. We could try to push on that. We do have a fair number of priorities in front of us already. Yeah. But I do think it's a pretty interesting issue, and probably aligns really well with work that Community and Economic Development Program is focused on in terms of local food production and the local economy. So it's a fascinating issue.
Does that cover your questions, Commissioner Senega?
Yeah, it does. I mean, I would like to see how we could maybe get that green. I mean, I know Commissioner Buck and Commissioner Trieger also have been receiving some public comment about this stuff.
I mean, if you want to suggest that this get elevated to a priority, you could do that. And I would do my best to go see if we could get something into play this session. Again, it's late in the session, but to my earlier comments, sometimes, if you at least get a bill introduced and maybe get a public hearing on it, it comes back again the next year around. I mean, nobody, as far as I know, nobody's really elevated this. I know Senator Manning was interested in it in 21, and he asked me again, could we, let's go, let's do it. And again, it was just that there's still some significant opposition think the opposition, there's a couple things here. One is that Farm Bureau has some real traditional members who see ag land as ag land. That's how it should be. None of these things, none of these other things should creep in, even events, right? That's been kind of a controversial deal. And then the other thing was we never really got very good definition of what local food would be. So in the bill that we had, it said food that was grown in the local vicinity, but it wasn't defined what local vicinity meant. And in our working group, we could never quite agree on what local meant either. So there was that issue. Turns out words matter.
Vice Chair Trigger?
Thank you, Chair. Just to follow on to that, I'm agnostic on the issue of whether we elevate that this session, but it does speak to, as you said, Mr. Kyler, the nature of things. You know, the fact that we had an agenda item earlier on paid leave Oregon, which was really something that started with advocates on the ground with workers who didn't have the protections and the support they needed to stay stable in their jobs when the inevitable life changes happen. That was a process that started in, I think, 2009 with advocates working to float up, and it took this many years not only to pass the legislation, but then for it to be implemented. So sometimes the process is the outcome, having the conversations, bringing people along, changing the language. And sometimes people change, right? The legislature changes, advocates, folks are in different positions in the community. As someone who's been working on local food security initiatives for decades, this has also been a conversation that has ebbed and flowed in those circles. It's one of the many reasons many of us tried for a long time to establish a statewide food policy council so that there would be a sort of clearinghouse for issues around food, which would include agribusiness, anti-hunger policy, all manner of things. So this is, to me, a really important and exciting concept because it does touch on land use and economic development and resiliency with keeping a strong local food system. It elevates smaller business and it addresses, you mentioned this idea of events. We hear a lot from the community, there just aren't enough venues for people to do what they want to do and bring guests in for weddings and family reunions and all the things. So this is a topic I'm really interested in and happy to be a connector with some of the local food advocates in the community on. I'm not opposed to us elevating it, but given some of the issues that we are already working on and elevating, just thinking about capacity and the relative impact of the things that we're already trying to lift up and carry. I don't have strong feelings about elevating it. I wouldn't block trying to elevate it as a priority, but I think there's a lot of work we could be doing short of elevating it to a legislative priority to set the groundwork to be more successful in a future session.
Thank you for that, Vice Chair. And, I have more to say about other things, but to that particularly, Alex, you're only two people, and how many bills are there? So, if what happens in the legislature, and in my short tenure there, and I was not there for a very long time, I was there for one session, that was long enough for me, thank you. It lasted till August that year. And I left the legislature to be the executive director of Food for Lane County. So but you're only two people, and there are all of these bills that you'd like to keep track of that you wish they would move. But if they don't move, if there's no action on them in the legislature, it's pretty much a waste of your time, unless you're building, a foundation for subsequent action in subsequent legislatures, which a lot of the work up there is. And that's what's particularly frustrating for a legislator. Particularly, I went there after serving 8 years as a Eugene City Councilor. I couldn't believe how slow things were at the Eugene City Council. And I got there and it's like, oh my gosh, glaciers here moved backwards in the legislature, So it really is, it's a matter of how much time, energy, and bandwidth do you have. While it is particularly important, we have a wonderful county and a part of the attraction to Lane County, and we're hugely attractive. Ask anybody who works for Travel Oregon, for instance. My sister works for Travel Oregon, said Lane County is one of the two main attractants in Oregon for overseas travelers. And one of the reasons is because of the agricultural nature of Lane County and because of the wineries and the things that wineries have to offer, and other venues outside of the metropolitan area. So it's of interest to us all to make Lane County a more attractive place to visit and stay. But sometimes, gosh, there's just so much going on, Alex, and if the wheels are slow, you're burning rubber trying to trying to turn them. And I understand that. And as frustrating as it is the nature of the legislature. And quite often something that you think is going to go doesn't go. Something you do put energy into doesn't go. So, I have a couple more questions as we go down. I'll look to my left. Commissioner Buck has her hand raised, followed by Commissioner Lovall.
Thank you, Chair. On this particular item, I can fully respect the Farm Bureau's more traditional approach. At the same time, I think a lot of people have lost touch about where their food is from and how it's presented to the public locally. And so I, of course, support looking at this further. And I have folks in South Lane that would love to have a wedding venue at their farm, but it's practically impossible to go through the steps, and financially it's exhausting. It's just way too much money to go through it, the whole process, but it's just a wedding venue. And for me, those are small businesses that could bring some economic vitality and show off our agricultural region to the larger state and world as they visit here. And so I would love to be able to give Alex the flexibility, hopefully, as it's stated in here, that does provide that. So if there's an opportunity that comes up, that we're able to jump on it. Thank you, Chair.
And thank you, Commissioner Buck, for that addition. Commissioner Lovall.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I echo all the comments being said about this. And, by looking at the two of you's foreheads and those dark creases on top of them, you don't need another burden on your plate. But you guys are doing an awesome job. But at the same time, too, we've received inquiries from rural farm owners that are struggling just to keep the doors open. They're struggling just to make their payments and taxes. And I see this as, a lifeline to those rural families that have properties that can have people on them and make a little bit of money. And like Commissioner Buck said, we need to know how important our farms really are and how important those farm families really are. And I think we're kind of missing the boat. So any opportunity you have would be to prioritize this and not burn another wrinkle in your forehead. I think I would support as well.
Thank you, Commissioners, for the discussion. It kind of centered on agribusiness a little bit, but there are other things in the legislature that we'd like to see move forward. For instance, public safety issues. And once again, I'm going to look at you, Steve Adams, as I talk about Alex Kyler. He's established a presence in that building that, as he's mentioned, other people ask him to help him with their things. And whenever it is a part of our priorities, it's not difficult for Alex to do that. But he does a lot of things inside of that building, and you're recognizing that as much time as you're spending in the building now. And it's a pretty frustrating place to be without all of the places that you can usually go, But that being said, we can't do everything. We can do anything, but we can't do everything, right? And so it's a matter of determining what it is that we can put our energy into. And I do have a question that it's regarding funding for the DA's office. We have we know this, the board knows this. Our DA's office is drastically underfunded, understaffed, underfunded. And this is a general question, Alex, regarding our support for associations that we support. If an association is supporting something in the legislature, where do we fall on that typically? Let's talk about that, because for instance, the ODAA, Oregon District Attorneys Association, is supporting legislation. I can't describe it specifically, that would implement more funding from the state level for the district attorneys. We do all that we can in Lane County, I think. I mean, probably we can tweak things and do more, but so Mr. Bokarski, you have your hand raised, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. And I just want to say I had an opportunity to chat with the DA who ran over here because we thought the DA would want to share some comments. And so I just had a conversation. She indicated what her perspective was. And so I'll just share that with the board that, as you were referring to, Chair, that the Oregon District Attorneys Association has supported a package of funding proposals for district attorneys' offices statewide. My understanding is that there are a number of bills that are all separate that address different issues of funding within the DA's office. And so the DA's request was that the county consider, that Lane County consider supporting that package of budget supports from the legislature. And one of the things that I spoken with Mr. Kyler and Mr. Adams about was, is there a way, because there's at least one of those we are aware of that would result in an increased cost on counties. So if there was a way to support, I'll just put this out there for your discussion and for Mr. Kyler to also respond to, if there's a way for us to support that package with the caveat that there's a net revenue increase to counties to support, or to DA's offices. Does that make sense? As opposed to a net drain on county budgets. What we're looking for really is for the state to provide funding support for DA's offices, not to impose new requirements that would serve almost like an unfunded mandate, right? That would require the county. So that was, I think, I elaborated more than I guess I editorialized a little bit there on the end, but that was the concern of the DA, was just wanting to make sure that we were considering support for the broader package of DA funding supports that were requested and supported by the ODA.
Okay. And yeah, I don't have a good handle on how many different bills that involves, Mr. Kyle. Do you know?
Mr. Chair,
I know the one, but go ahead.
Commissioners, I've seen it, but I don't know all the individual bills, but it is a package, that is for sure. I guess to speak more broadly to this, one of the things I was going to say in that introductory comments is we have a great number of employees who participate in associations. So they're like a trade association in a way, but they're typically a public entities. We've got Juvenile Directors Association, we've got Community Corrections Directors Association, the Oregon Association of Assessors, OSACA, county administrators have a national association. I mean, there's all these associations out there. And not the least of which is the Association of Oregon Counties. The Association of Oregon Counties finds itself at odds with each other quite a bit, right? I mean, they have very robust conversations up there, and we've never sort of suggested that from time to time we will weigh in on something that's specifically in play at the association, but we don't tend to say, I don't think the board has ever come to any sort of agreement about, well, if I serve on a committee, I've got to sort of have fidelity to the Lane County platform. See what I mean? It's like each individual person goes up there and they participate in that process. I was aware of the District Attorneys Association package, but it never got, when we asked for amendments to or adjustments to the agenda for legislative committee, there was no like, hey, I want to put that package onto the agenda, which would have gotten it into this process. We could do that at the next meeting and bring it back to you after having those kinds of conversations at legislative committee. That's what it's really designed to do, is get in a little bit more into the weeds on particular bills. Mm-hmm. But we did not do that at the last legislative committee meeting.
Okay. Then anybody else right now? I need to form my words pretty carefully on this. We know the issues that we have with the DA's office, and we also know that we support funding for the DA's office, as Mr. Mokrahowski said, if it's a net increase from the state. However, as bills move forward, Alex, we're going to need to make a stand on it one way or another. If it does be, what I'm asking here, Alex and Mr. Kyle and then Mr. Mokrahowski, is if this bill does begin to move forward, that looks like it's going to be a net cost to the county. Are you suggesting we'd oppose it?
I'm not. I wasn't suggesting that.
Mr. Chair, if I could help at all with this, under the document, we've got that sort of first, or on page 4 is sort of the general principles of the county. And so, we definitely work to maintain or increase existing revenue streams to counties. We work to ensure revenues exist to local governments to fund any new services. We advocate maintenance of existing local authority. These are very broadish principles. So there are certainly parts of that package that I think we would be able to support. When it comes to the one specific one that I was more aware of, which is the changing the PERS structure for district attorneys and deputy district attorneys, we have under 16 support efforts to mitigate exposure to future PERS liabilities. That one definitely would increase our costs. And so this is the place where we would probably have to question, okay, do we support that given that we've got this principle here?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
That's sort of the issues that we get into. And again, we could have that conversation at legislative committee. That's the place to have the conversation, I think. But obviously there is a package that's moving now. I know the Association of Oregon Counties is going to take it up again, I believe on this Friday, has come in front of them. And I will say, district attorneys, not every association that I mentioned has lobbyists, but the district attorneys do have their own lobbyist in Salem. And, they're a very effective organization in their own right.
Okay. All right, then. I think, one thing that we all agree on is that the district attorney's office is a little bit different to other offices in that when they don't do the job, people potentially are going to be subject to activity on the streets that criminal activity, and so it really, when we're talking about public safety, it's a little bit different. In other areas, we're looking to enhance our ability to serve. In the DA's office, we're on a defensive mode completely right now. We're defending ourselves against cuts in the DA's office and against the, you see public defenders, for instance, they can limit their cases. DAs cannot limit their cases. And if we're tying the district attorney's office hands in their ability to prosecute criminal activity that really is, bona fide criminal activity that's that if we don't do something to stem the tide, once again, we're in a defensive mode. We're not looking to add things. We're looking to not lose more things. And that's the critical nature of this. So I guess at this point, Alex, let's bring it back to the legislative committee. When do we meet again?
I have not scheduled that meeting.
Okay, well, we can talk about that
I
subsequent to
need
this.
to get that done. I will say, Mr. Chair, we do have a clear support for Community Corrections Act funding, for example. The DA's office is, critical in that funding stream because they're the ones that begin that pipeline in terms of eventually somebody getting under supervision. That's what the whole funding mechanism is based on, is the number of individuals under supervision. We have seen time and time again where cuts or other issues in the district attorney's office have had severe impacts on the Community Corrections Act funding allocations. And so you're absolutely right. It is something that we pay close attention to. And I'm sorry, I was under the impression that there was just the one issue that she wanted to bring. I didn't realize it was the whole package.
Okay, good. Well, let's take a deeper dive, Mr. Kyler. And once again, there are so many things happening in the legislative session. And when I was there, every bill came to us in paper form, completely printed out in paper form. And you saw the files that we had in our offices back then. So the plethora of things that come before the legislature. And this year we have, in the House in particular, we have a brand new slate of legislators who've never done this before. It's going to slow things down. And we also have a partisan legislature that seems to want to fight every single thing across the board. So that slows things down even further, which inhibits your ability to bring our issues forward. Even things that should move aren't going to move. So, all right. Questions or comments? Go ahead, Vice Chair Trieger.
Thank you. This is on a different topic if we're ready to move off of.
Go ahead right now.
Thank you. Just back to the CAFA funding, HB 2088. Where is that bill now? Has it been heard in a committee? Has it been assigned? Where is that?
Chair Farr, Commissioner Trieger, the 2088 was heard in the Revenue Committee, it was last Wednesday. public hearing at 8 a.m. The chair of the committee, Representative Nancy Nathanson, indicated that the bill as introduced would need a great deal of work, but she was encouraging and directing proponents and opponents to get together in a work group. And so she is in charge of naming people into that work group, and will continue to work that issue to an outcome, hopefully where everybody finds consensus, and the bill will come back in a work session with probably a significant amendment.
Great, thank you. And so I assume Osaka and there's another, the Tax Assessors Association, that those folks are really
That's
sort
Osaka.
of the primary monitoring and work. Okay, great, thank you.
All right, further discussion? Then let's move to action. Anything else you need from us, Mr. Kyler? Then let's move to action. We have before us a board order. Just very briefly, before I ask for a motion on that order, Mr. Kyler, no small part of this is giving you the gazelle-like opportunity to act when things come up, as they come up, without having to come back to the board to say, hey, what about this? That's the way you described it. Is that a good characterization of much of the stuff that's in this, in the package that we're looking at today?
Correct.
Very good. Then Vice Chair Trigger?
Thank you, Chair. I will preface my motion with deep appreciation of Mr. Kyler, not only for his years here at Lane County, but particularly navigating all the moving parts and pieces. And I will just note for the public, he is the only lobbyist for the entire Lane County. So all of our departments, all of the work we do. So thank you for that. I would like to, with that, move approval of Order 2301-31-03 in the matter of adopting recommendations of the Lane County Legislative Committee.
Second it?
Moved by Vice Chair Trigger and seconded by Commissioner Lovell. We have Order 2301-3103. Discussion to the motion. And you know, we all repeat that. And Alex, you hear it continually, not just from people in Lane County, but from people at AOC, for instance, who recognize the work that you do. And Mr. Adams, you're spending a lot of time there now, and I think you're a registered lobbyist now. So we do actually have 2 lobbyists in Salem. Maybe the first time ever. So
The policy team framework is really helping.
excellent. And you call on county commissioners to help whenever it's necessary to step forward and do the work that Commissioner Trigger's done extensively, Commissioner Buck's done extensively. So very good. Well, my little share every now and then. So do we have any discussion to the motion? I see none. Then I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes unanimously. Thank you. Well, Commissioners, I think we've checked everything else down the list off. And we're at the point in time where we have an executive session this afternoon, which will bring us out into other business should we need to come out into other business. But for the time being, Mr. Mokraxi, is there any other business that we need to attend to this morning?
Not that I'm aware of.
Very good. Then I will read us into executive session, and I believe the executive session will start at 1:30 today. So the sound of my gavel, we will recess as a Board of County Commissioners, and we'll reconvene as in executive session. And a note right here. The Board of County Commissioners will meet in executive session to consult with counsel concerning the legal rights and duties of a public body with regard to current litigation or litigation likely to be filed. This executive session is held pursuant to ORS 192-6602H, which allows the Board of County Commissioners to meet in executive session for the purposes listed. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience are asked to leave the room. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report any of the deliberations during the executive session, except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. No decision may be made in executive session. We reserve the right to come back out into public session should the need arise. At the sound of my gavel, the regular Board of County Commissioners will be adjourned, and we will reconvene as in executive session at 1:30 in our offices remote.